A lot of people are saying that the UFC is falling off, whether that's because of certain UFC fighters not wanting to fight other ones, or just overall lackluster performances. We're going to be going through every single UFC fighter and discussing the biggest problem with them, starting with Khamzat Chimaev. The biggest problem with Khamzat Chimaev is that if he beats Dricus du Plessis, he's going to be a very inactive champion. That's his biggest problem. He's super inactive. Whether that's the illnesses he always deals with or the weight cuts that he deals with, he fights once a year, at the very most, to be honest. And if he beats Khamzat, now he's going to be our champion and he's going to be inactive. And if he's champion, we're going to have to wait once a year to see a middleweight fight. Just be ready for that. You know, he already kind of killed his hype slightly because of how inactive he was, but as a champion, I think it's going to be way worse. But Charles Oliveira's next, and the biggest problem with Charles Oliveira is that he's getting an opportunity to fight for the vacant belt. And I don't mind it because he's super exciting. His matchup with Ilia Topuria is extremely hype. I'm so excited for that fight because they're both entertaining fighters. But in terms of actually being the right person, Charles Oliveira is not. He's coming off a win against Michael Chandler. That does not earn him a fight for the vacant belt. The person who should be fighting Ilia Topuria is Arman Tsarukyan. He's the real tough test. He's the harder opponent. But because Charles Oliveira is more exciting, he's going to get the title shot instead. I'm not super mad at it, but that's the biggest problem because the real hardest matchup for Ilia Topuria is probably Arman Tsarukyan now that Islam Makhachev left. I know that's not really that bad of a problem, but with a guy like Charles Oliveira, who has basically zero problems, that's the only one I can find. But next up, we got Alex Pereira. Listen, the biggest problem with Alex Pereira now is that he might be washed. He actually might be washed up. He's like turning 38 years old if he's not already 38. He's coming off of a loss against Ankalaev, and going into the rematch, it does not seem likely he's going to win. He's taken a lot of time off. He's probably going to take towards the end of the year for this fight to happen. What happens then? He's only getting older. And if he loses against Ankalaev, we might just lose one of the biggest stars in the UFC. And I don't think the UFC is in a position right now for that to happen because, you know, as I said, the UFC, people are talking about falling off. If Alex Pereira is done, then the UFC will be at an all-time low, I feel like. But Adesanya's next. The biggest problem with Adesanya, again, is he's washed. He's not as good as he once was. He's getting worse. And we're losing another star. Israel Adesanya has like one good fight left. It's against Sean Strickland. And after that, I think he loses that fight. And then he's on a 4-fight losing streak. 0-4. One of the most dominant middleweight champions, now 0-4. You don't want to see this guy go on an Anderson Silva losing streak. He'll probably retire if he loses to Sean Strickland. And we're out of one of the biggest stars as well, alongside with Alex Pereira. But Ilia Topuria is next. And the biggest problem with Ilia Topuria is he's probably going to beat Charles Oliveira. And then what happens? Ilia Topuria is the type of guy to sit out for a year just for a quote-unquote big fight. I can imagine that he beats Charles Oliveira and then he waits for Paddy Pimblett to fight Dustin Gaethje, and then he fights Paddy Pimblett as his first title defense. That's the type of guy Ilia is. He's not going to be chasing after Arman Tsarukyan. He wants to put on the biggest fights. He's a showman, and he's either going to wait out for Paddy Pimblett or Islam Makhachev, depending on what happens. The biggest problem with Dustin Gaethje is that right now, this dude is so entitled. This guy said if he's not getting a title shot, he's going to retire. This guy thinks he's earned a title shot based off his performance against Fiziev. Bro, his fight before that, he got flatline against Max Holloway. That is not enough to get a title shot, especially with all the other contenders at lightweight right now. Dustin Gaethje's in the very back of the line. The biggest problem with Sean O'Malley is that this dude's getting undeserved title shots. Not only is he getting undeserved title shots, but the UFC pushes him harder than every other UFC fighter when Sean O'Malley is, let's be honest, not that big of a star. Like in the build up to the second Merab fight, nobody was interested in the fight. Nobody wanted this matchup to happen. And yet they're pushing Sean O'Malley harder than any other fighter in the UFC. Every embedded has the face of Sean O'Malley on it. We're sick of seeing this guy. He's not a champion. He didn't even deserve his second title shot. But the biggest problem with Merab is that he's beat every single person in the division. There's an exception of Corey Sandhagen, but once he beats Corey Sandhagen, the bantamweight division is going to be a ghost town. It's kind of like what happened with Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman beat everybody and lapped them twice. He beat Masvidal twice. He beat Colby Covington twice. In a year from now, the bantamweight division is going to be an absolute ghost town, and it's going to be because of Merab. But for JDM, the biggest problem he has is that he's kind of boring, right? Out of every champion in the UFC, he's probably the least talked about. The only thing that people really talk about with him is his matchup with Islam Makhachev. And you can't really fault him 100% for nobody really knowing who he is, because the way he got the title shot was pretty random. Bilal Muhammad was supposed to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov, but that fight couldn't end up happening. JDM was going to fight Leon Edwards, but he randomly got placed against Bilal Muhammad for a title shot, and then he wins. He was kind of an unknown contender that just got pushed straight into a title shot and has become champion. So no one really knows about this guy as much as the other champions. And because of that, the Islam Makhachev super fight is not that hype as it would have been if it was a dominant champion. But the biggest issue with Max Holloway is that he's kind of causing a logjam in the lightweight division, similar to how the welterweight division is, with this whole new influx of lightweights, top contender lightweights like Max Holloway, Ilia Topuria. There's so many contenders, it's hard to make a matchup. After Max Holloway fights Dustin Poirier, if he wins, that could be considered almost enough for a title shot. But no one wants to see Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria at lightweight again. So he's going to be sitting out on the sidelines for a little bit. And I think it's going to be hard to make matchups in the future with Max Holloway in it. But Sean Strickland's next. And the clear biggest problem with this guy is that he's just boring, dude. I don't know how people didn't figure this out enough. And I don't know how he got such a big fan base. It must have just been from the way he talks, but this guy's fighting is painful to watch. It really is. The only reason his fights with DDP were entertaining was because of DDP. When Sean Strickland fought Paulo Costa, that was one of the most boring performances I've seen from a high-level fighter in a really long time. This guy has like 3 moves, a jab, a teep, really just 2 moves. You want to get hyped for certain matchups, like his matchup with Adesanya, but at the end of the day, is it really going to be that entertaining? It's probably going to be just like the first fight. And if it's like that, that fight was not that entertaining other than the fact that it was a huge upset. Jiri Prochazka's next, and the biggest problem with him is that he's off at college. Like, he's not even fighting. This dude's getting a degree at college as a professional fighter, and he's just inactive right now. That's really the only problem you can say with Jiri Prochazka is he's inactive and he's off doing something else. But keeping it in the light heavyweight division, we have Magomed Ankalaev. Listen, he beat Alex Pereira. That's the biggest problem. Who would you rather have as a champion, Pereira or Ankalaev? I don't think that's a hard choice. And with Ankalaev being around, we no longer have Alex Pereira as champion. One of the biggest stars in the entire UFC, Ankalaev's basically retired the guy. Like, after this rematch, if Alex Pereira doesn't move up to heavyweight, he's basically retired. But Paddy Pimblett is next. Here's the biggest problem with Paddy Pimblett. First of all, he's overrated. After this Michael Chandler performance, people act like Paddy Pimblett's just like gonna be this next champion. I'm telling you, Paddy Pimblett is not going to be a champion. As long as there's Ilia Topuria, Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, Arman Tsarukyan, Paddy Pimblett's not gonna be a champion. And that Michael Chandler performance has people thinking that he's gonna be the next champion. Bro, it's Michael Chandler. Let's not forget that he beat Michael Chandler, okay? He didn't beat an Arman Tsarukyan. But his next fight is probably going to be someone like Justin Gaethje. Another relatively easy matchup for where Paddy Pimblett is in the lightweight division. And this isn't new for Paddy Pimblett. He's been fed the easiest matchups and the most favorable matchups since he's been in the UFC. I get it, he's a star, but the biggest problem with Paddy Pimblett is he gets easy matchups and he's overrated because of it. A guy like Justin Gaethje, if Paddy Pimblett beats Justin Gaethje, it's not as impressive as you think. Like, Justin Gaethje is not in his prime anymore. He's old, his ground game's horrible. It's a perfect matchup for Paddy Pimblett. Let's be reasonable here. Paddy Pimblett is not going to be a champion, and he's overrated. But Shavkat Rakhmonov is next, and the biggest problem with Shavkat Rakhmonov is he basically like sabotaged the entire welterweight division. He has some injury where he's going to be out for literally like an entire year. Like, I don't think he's allowed to fight until at least the end of 2025. And it kind of took a little bit of hype away from the title picture. And now one of the most hyped up contenders, Shavkat, undefeated, is on the sidelines. And let's be real, his hype is kind of way less than it used to be. I don't know if it's just because of the Ian Garry performance or just the fact that it's kind of like a Khamzat Chimaev situation where he's just sitting out for so long, people stop to care. But Shavkat is not as hyped up as he once was. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he got injured. But Ian Garry's next, and Ian Garry has the same problem as Justin Gaethje. He's entitled to a title shot that he's not going to get or shouldn't get. Like, he beat Carlos Prates. Okay, Carlos Prates is a good fighter, but it's not like he beat a #1 contender. He doesn't deserve just a title shot just because of that, just because he took a short notice fight. He was coming off a loss against Shavkat. I think out of any contender after Islam Makhachev and JDM fight, Shavkat should probably fight next. He beat Ian Garry. He's undefeated. Give Shavkat the title shot. Maybe Buckley starches Usman and he gets a title shot, but Ian Garry right now, I don't think he should get the next title shot, but he for some reason thinks he does. But the biggest problem with Dustin Poirier is that really the only problem is he's retiring. We're not going to see any more Dustin Poirier, one of the most entertaining fighters at lightweight in the entire UFC, and now he's retiring after his Max Holloway fight. And especially if he beats Max Holloway, then that would be worst case scenario, because I mean, he gets to go out with a good ending, but in terms of fans, Holloway's going to have less hype than if he beat Dustin Poirier. But now Arman Tsarukyan's next. And I think we all know the biggest problem with Arman. It's he pulled out last minute against Islam Makhachev. And ever since he pulled out, the UFC absolutely hates him for it. I mean, for pretty good reason. He kind of ruined one of the most hyped matchups of this entire year. And now he's kind of blacklisted and he's not even in the title picture anymore. One of the best fighters in the lightweight division, he's now not even able to get a title shot. And the biggest problem with it is that it wasn't really that big of a reason for him to pull out. Like, the doctors cleared him to fight, yet he still pulled out of the fight. But Tom Aspinall's next. The biggest problem with Tom Aspinall is that the guy just doesn't trash talk enough. Like, I'm going to be honest, with the Jon Jones situation, I wish he would talk a little bit more trash. He's overly respectful of Jon Jones, and I think he would have a lot more hype behind him if he actually talked a little bit of shit. And I'm not saying like force it like some of these fighters who try to like copy McGregor, but if he was a little bit more outspoken and maybe he trashed Jon Jones more on social media, maybe that fight does happen. But Aspinall is a pretty quiet guy. He doesn't talk much. And if the fight happens regardless, which I don't think it will, if Aspinall talks trash, the fight would be way more hype. But keeping it in the heavyweight division, we got Ciryl Gane. The biggest problem with Gane is that, where is he? He's one of the most inactive fighters in the entire UFC. Right, his last fight was against Volkov. Before that, I don't even know. This guy fights less than once a year, it feels like. And he's one of the most entertaining heavyweights, let's be real. Out of all the heavyweights that are trash, he's actually one of the only decent ones. Yet he's off doing everything other than fighting. But now we have Bo Nickal. And the biggest problem with Bo Nickal is he got fraud checked. He tried to convince us that he was going to destroy Khamzat Chimaev. Yeah, he got fraud checked by Rainer de Ritter. And, you know, he was hyped up. He was put on these main cards. It was all for nothing. He got pushed harder than Sean O'Malley, it seems like. Yet he delivered so much less than Sean O'Malley. And the biggest problem was he just kept on getting fed scrubs over and over and over again. And because of that, he thought he was going to be the next champion until he fought a somewhat decent fighter. And now there's basically no hype behind Bo Nickal. Even though we all kind of thought that he would never beat Khamzat Chimaev after the Paul Craig fight, now it's like, we don't even know if he's going to be a top contender. But Michael Chandler's next. Michael Chandler's biggest issue is that, I mean, he has some of the worst IQ in the entire UFC. He's actually really talented. And if he actually had good game plans, I mean, he could have been champion. He almost knocked out Charles Oliveira. He almost finished Oliveira. And I don't want to take any credit from Charles Oliveira because he recovered. He did find the finish, but there are moments where Chandler can finish the fight and it always slips away from him. It seems like everything Chandler does in the ring, it just backfires for this guy. But Alexandre Pantoja's next, the flyweight champion. The biggest problem with him is he's boring. He puts on pretty good fights. He has some wars, but he's a flyweight. He doesn't really get many finishes. I know he finished Kaya Sakura, but it was a debuting UFC fighter. And especially where he's at now, how dominant he is, going into a super fight against Merab, I can't say that's the most hype super fight. It's actually probably one of the least hyped super fights of all time. And it's because Pantoja is just, let's be real, not that hyped of a fighter, whether that's just because he's a flyweight or because he doesn't have the worst performances. He doesn't have the most boring style, but for some reason, people just don't care about this guy as much as any of the other champions. And it's most likely because he's a flyweight. But Kamaru Usman's next, and his biggest issue is that he's just old, man. He's getting washed up. He's kind of like Adesanya. I think once this Buckley fight happens, people are going to realize, you know, this guy's not a top contender anymore. He used to be a dominant champion. He had, you know, his 3 last losses were really competitive, but I think the time that he's taken off since his Khamzat fight in 2023, that's the nail in the coffin, and I think he's just going to be washed up from now on. He's another star that the UFC just lost, basically. But lastly, we have Leon Edwards. Again, Leon Edwards is just washed. He had people thinking that he was going to go on a legendary run like Kamaru Usman did. Then he fights Bilal and he gets absolutely destroyed. The real big problem with this is that going into the Sean Brady fight, he made absolutely no changes He actually looked worse than he did against Belal. You know, when he lost against Belal, he blamed it on the back injury that he had and the time that he woke up or some shit like that. But into the Sean Brady fight, there was no excuses. It literally looked like he gave up. And coming from a champion, like a former welterweight champion that beat Kamaru Usman twice, it's just such a bad look. And he literally lost every bit of hype that he once had. But those are the biggest problems with these UFC fighters. Let me know what you guys think about this. Did I get any wrong? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys like this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys in the next one.